speakers.
Hello everyone. My name is Kamar Malik. I'm the Information Secretary of Baloch Human Rights Council. On behalf of Baloch Human Rights Council, I welcome you all to this seminar. Baloch Human Rights Council is a human rights advocacy organization which since its inception in 2008 has been highlighting the plight of Baloch people and the various human rights abuses they're facing in Iran and Pakistan. And it has actively been campaigning for the right to self-determination to be recognized by the international community. In line with our objectives, we have arranged this seminar. The topic of today's seminar is the Baloch Lives Matter. When we say that, we are referring to a people who have been subjected to worst of the human rights abuses for the last many decades. To set some background information for those of you who are not familiar with Balochistan straddles in three countries, Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, with its major part being controlled by Pakistan. And as we will be majorly focusing on that part, Balochistan was forcibly annexed by Pakistan in 1948. And since then, the Pakistani authorities have employed a very narrow agenda of disregarding the cultural, linguistic, and historical existence of the Baloch people and to assimilate them, their thousands-year-old identity into a fundamentalist, non-existent Pakistani identity. In doing so, the Pakistani authorities have implemented some very vicious policies, ranging from enforced disappearances to extrajudicial killing of the Baloch human rights and social and political activists, to the resource exploitation of the Baloch wealth. And as we are commencing this seminar, as of today, even the human rights situation has only worsened in Balochistan without any internal or external remedies. And I will leave that to the speakers to elaborate on different aspects of the human rights violations facing the Baloch people. The BHRC have produced a short documentary which I would like request the lady to play, which will provide a historical context and explain the present situation of the human rights situation in Balochistan. Please.
In 1666, the Confederation of the Baloch tribe created the first Baloch state, known at that time as the Khanate of Kalat. During the 19th century, Tsarist Russia and the British Empire became entangled in a cold and hot war of attrition in Central Asia. Russia was pushing southwards, and the British were trying to save their precious Indian colony from Russian advances. Many Central Asian states and nations were caught in this conflict, which is known in historical chronicles as the Great Game. Balochistan became a victim of this superpower rivalry. It was occupied by British troops in November 1839. The capital, Kalat, was occupied and the Khan of Baloch was killed. Later, the colonial power divided Balochistan and many of its regions were given to Persia and Afghanistan. In the wake of the Second World War, the British decided to quit India. However, to safeguard its political, strategic, and economic interests in the region, it divided India on religious grounds and created the client state of Pakistan. The Baloch state, on 11th of August August 1947 declared its independence, and a bicameral parliament was elected, and the Khan of Baloch became the head of the newly independent state. However, despite initially recognizing the independence of Balochistan, the Pakistani troops invaded it and occupied it on 27th of March 1948. The Baloch offered political and armed uprisings against the occupation, but were overwhelmed, bringing tremendous losses to the Baloch in men and material. Because of this prolonged and bloody conflict of the Baloch with Pakistan, the history of Balochistan from 1948 is a tale of sufferings and misery for the Baloch. The Pakistani state has been carrying out ruthless military actions and commits heinous crimes against humanity in Balochistan. Rights violations in the regions have many aspects. They include cultural domination and economic exploitation. They include enforced disappearances and illegal detentions, abductions and torture of political activists, students, journalists, intellectuals and human rights activists. What's more, there's a kill and dump policy of the armed forces. Balochistan is one of the richest regions in the world in terms of natural resources. The national wealth of Balochistan has been ruthlessly exploited by Pakistan since the beginning of its occupation. In recent decades, China has emerged as the main exploiter of the Baloch natural resources. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, is the face of this colonial practice. Cultural domination is another aspect of the human rights violations in the region. Balochi language is not being taught in schools. Instead, a North Indian language has been declared as the official language of the state and medium of instruction in educational institutions. The 1,000-years-old Balochi language is at the verge of extinction. In the school curriculum in Pakistan, Baloch cultural and societal norms are being ridiculed as un-Islamic, and the Baloch are defined as barbaric. Baloch entry into the corridors of power has been systematically blocked. Any political activity demanding the rights of the Baloch people is being regarded as anti-state and anti-Islamic. The genuine Baloch leadership has never been allowed to represent their people in the power circles of the state. As a facade, some of the social outcasts, drug traffickers, and religious fanatics which are loyal to the army and members of death squads are being selected as the representatives of the Baloch people. Antisocial and extremist religious elements organised by the state security agencies in various parts of Balochistan are being used in kidnapping and dumping of bodies of political activists. They are popularly known in Balochistan as the Army's death squads. They act in conjunction with the security forces. In most of the documented cases, the perpetrators acted openly, in broad daylight, sometimes in busy public areas with apparently little concern for the presence of numerous witnesses. Political activists, writers, singers, poets, and human rights defenders became victims of the army's proxy death squads since the start of the present century. On many occasions, the mutilated dead bodies of those killed have been found dumped in desolate areas of Balochistan. The security agencies pick up human rights activists, journalists, doctors, teachers, political leaders, student activists, and tribal elders, and keep them incommunicado for years. These people are dubbed the missing persons. The fate of hundreds of such people is still uncertain. In September 2010, Defense of Human Rights, an Islamabad-based human rights group, has put the number of missing persons at 1,700. The Baloch human rights groups have registered verified cases of the missing and disappeared persons. Sardar Akhtar Mengal, leader of the Balochistan National Party, submitted a list of missing persons to the National Assembly in Pakistan. The number increased from 82 in 2011 to 1,257 in 2015. The total number of missing people during this period is 3,732. During the last 2 years alone, 1,230 individuals have been added to the list of missing persons in Balochistan. Because of the atrocities, thousands have fled their abodes and are now living as refugees in various parts of Pakistan. Thousands have fled and are seeking asylum in different parts of the world. In order to clean the areas adjacent to China-Pakistan Economic Corridor projects and roads, nearly 1 million people have been internally displaced. In the process of implementing this strategy, thousands were forced to leave their homes. Whilst affected are Kulu, Derabukti, Auran, Panajgor and Ketch districts, where several settlements and villages are now ghost areas. Dumping of the bodies of the Baloch activists in mass graves is another ugly act of the Pakistani army. In December 2013, a mass grave was discovered from Thutak Kudzar district of Balochistan. Some of the remains were identified as persons picked up by the army's death squads on different occasions. On January 25, 2014, 3 other mass graves were found after one of them was discovered by a shepherd who saw pieces of human bodies and bones. Another mass grave was discovered on February 20, 2017, with several bodies belonging to the Bugti tribe. Besides this, on several occasions, mutilated bodies of Baloch missing persons were found floating in the Indus River. The draconian policy of collective punishment adopted by the Pakistani security agencies is being carried out with impunity in a 21st century world, with any resistance activity against the security forces. Nearby villages would be raided and mass punishment given to the civilian population. As the state of Pakistan has only been relying on military oppression in dealing with the Baloch national question, Balochistan has been converted into a war zone. After every 25 kilometers, a checkpoint has been established, either by regular army units or by paramilitary forces. It has been declared a no-go area for the international media and human rights organisations. Nothing of the atrocities is being reported in the international media. Balochistan is in turmoil. The people are living in a state of siege in a 21st century world. The tale of blood and tears in Balochistan is continuing. Many actions of Pakistani security forces and its auxiliary, religious or extremist organisation clearly come into the category of war crimes, according to the United Nations General Assembly resolutions. But the disgusting fact is that the international community and the civilized world is keeping a blind eye towards what Pakistan is doing in Balochistan. In the Pakistani war in Balochistan, the gross violations of human rights need immediate attention and intervention from the international community. It is high time for the world to recognise the Pakistani actions in Balochistan as genocide, according to the UN definition of the term. It is also imperative that the international community must also realise that it would not help to keep separate standards for those who committed genocide in Central Europe and Africa for those who are committing genocide in Balochistan. The Baloch, who is facing the worst of atrocities and genocide acts, needs the help of the civilized world in a meaningful way before it is too late.
Thank you very much for your patience and for watching the documentary. I'll now request Dr. Lakuluhana to please join me on the stage and present the session. May I please request Dr. Hidayat Bhutto to please join us on the stage. And I'll request Mr. Junaid Qureshi to please join me on the stage, please. May I please request also Emma Barman, please. May I also ask Mr. Manoj Bharati to please come on stage. May I ask Mr. Hassan Akram, please join us on the stage. May I also ask Mr. Nasir Aziz Khan, I'll request now Elva of Global University, please. And I also ask Mr. Jamshed Hamidi to please. Thank you very much for the speakers. And I will introduce each speaker when I request them to share their views on the session. May I first of all request Dr. Hidayat Bhutto to please share his views on the topic. Dr. Hidayat Bhutto is a human rights activist associated with the World Sindhi Congress. He is currently the organizer of UK and Europe chapters of World Sindhi Congress. Dr. Hidayat Bhutto, please.
Thank you, Comrade. Here the topic is Baloch lives matters. I think from Balochistan's perspective, Balochistan, as we have seen in the documentary, was occupied forcefully by the Pakistani army in 1948 March. Since then, constantly, Balochistan is struggling for their right to self-determination and their freedom struggle since the day first. Similarly, we Sindhis are also subject to state occupation and enforced disappearances are happening in very, very crucial level, up to the level of genocide is happening. And in Balochistan, every day we see mutilated bodies, and every day we see enforced disappearances, and hunger strikes, protests are happening everywhere throughout the Pakistan. and even the university students has been kidnapped from the capital of Pakistan, Islamabad, so-called Islamabad Qaeda University students who are protesting for their loved ones, and they keep their records, and when they go home, they are picked up by these death squads and these people. State agencies are attacking them, disappearing them, not only there, but here in Western world, which we say is a civilized world. Here also, most of our defenders, human rights defenders, which raise their voices, and Pakistan, because of our silence of the Western world, and Western world is not talking against the Pakistan because of their interests. They are attacking here as well. In Sweden, we received Sajid Baloch, who was a journalist, who was raising voice for human rights for the Balochistan. He was killed. In Canada, our sister who was here many few times, Karina Baloch, who was a human rights defender, she was murdered and killed in Canada as their family and friends are blaming Pakistan agencies that they have attacked us. Because of the silence of the Western world and silence of the human rights so-called United Nations, we are not pressing on Pakistan, and Pakistan not only is killing the people on the ground, but they are threatening and killing people here as well. So we need to raise voices, we need to stand with Balochistan, and Balochistan has a right to self-determination. Balochistan should get, they want their freedom, and I request United Nations and the international community to stand with Balochistan and get their freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Please ask Nasir Aziz Khan to please share his views on the topic. Mr. Nasir Aziz Khan is a human rights activist from Kashmir. He is one of the leaders of the United Kashmir People's National Party.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to congratulate Baloch Human Rights Council for organizing this event here parallel to United Nations Human Rights 49th session. Baloch lives matter. No doubt, every life is very precious and should be protected. When we listen about Ukraine, whole world is standing with Ukraine, that Russia is committing crimes against humanity. We expect that international community should listen the voices of the Baloch people, Sindhi people, Pashtuns and Kashmiris. Pakistan systematically eliminating the civil society voices. Those who are raising their voice for their rights, for example, Baloch, Sindhis, Pashtuns, Kashmiris are the state victims. Our historical nation, Baloch nation, Sindhi nation, Pashtuns, and Kashmiris are peace-loving people. They believe in peace, humanity, and coexistence. But unfortunately, Pakistan is not ready to give the right to Baloch, Sindhis, Pashtuns, and Kashmiris. We are denied of basic rights. Now our people are demanding a right of life because their lives are under threat. Pakistan is bombing innocent Lord's peoples. She got fighter jets from United States and other Western countries. These countries are doing business with Pakistan. They should ask Pakistan. They should make Pakistan accountable. They should bring Pakistan into International Crime Court of Justice, crimes against humanity. There are thousands of the Baloch who are forcibly disappeared. Their loved ones are protesting for their release, for their asking Pakistan to produce them before the court if they did crimes and any sort of crime. There is a one commission on the missing persons in Pakistan, and this commission is headed by one retired judge. He says that Pakistani military and intelligence agencies cannot kidnap people. They might have gone to Afghanistan or other areas. She is always in the denial mode. She was saying that we don't know where is Bin Laden. He might be in Tora in Afghanistan, but world community has seen that he was found in Abbottabad and eliminated by United States. Every crime, every terrorist activity, if whether it is 9/11, it is in bombing in murder, in 7/7 in UK, footprints are in the Pakistan. Extremist groups are supported, funded, and protected by the state, whether it is in so-called Azad Kashmir, Balochistan, Balochistan, Sindh, Pakhtunkhwa. Every secular progressive voice is targeted by the state. There is a state policy and there is a list circulated by Pakistani government that around 22 activists should be eliminated. Those who are living already in exile. As our colleague panelist, Dr. Hadar Botas had mentioned about two Baloch who were killed, and one in Sweden and one in Canada. And there was plot to eliminate one blogger in Netherlands, and one person he got money from Pakistan. He is based in United Kingdom. He traveled to Netherlands to eliminate one activist. And there was a bank transaction. This guy got money from Pakistan. Somebody sent from Pakistan to in United Kingdom. Now, world community and Western countries should find these criminals in their societies. They should arrest them. They should punish them, because when voices of the civil society will be eliminated, you people will not get any ground facts, realities, and the crimes done by Pakistan against humanity. I will not take too much time. I extend my support on the behalf of my party, United Kashmir People's National Party, and people of the Kashmir. We stand with those people, all victim families, and we extend our solidarity and support to all of you. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin, for your views and support. I'll now ask Emma Brownholm. Emma is associated with the Global Human Rights Defense, an international NGO based in the Netherlands, and she's a Global Human Rights Defense coordinator for Pakistan. Please.
Thank you. If it's all right with you, I will first give the floor to my colleague Eva, so she can introduce her.
That's sort of so, Eva, please. She's associated with the Global Human Rights Defense. Eva.
Thank you. I will just shortly. Yes. Okay. I will just shortly introduce Global Human Rights Defense first before I will give the floor to my colleague. Good afternoon. My name is Eva, and I'm with Global Human Rights Defense. First, I want to thank Baloch Human Rights Council for inviting us, and to express that we find the work that you do very important. And with Global Human Rights Defense, we focus on monitoring and reporting human rights, especially focusing on minorities and marginalized groups. We mainly do that through our network, our own news websites, and attending protests like we also do here in Geneva. We strongly believe that true change can happen throughout grassroots effects, and therefore in all our work we process the voices of the victims of those human rights abuses. And we were granted a special consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council in 2015, and thereafter we kept promoting human rights violations, and we kept reporting human rights violations and promoting human rights, especially focusing on marginalized groups. And therefore we are very happy to be here, and we're very honored to be here so we could discuss the ongoing atrocities in Balochistan. And now I will give the floor to our coordinator, who will tell more, and she's the coordinator in Pakistan.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Emma Barner, and as I was already said, I am the coordinator for Team Pakistan at Global Human Rights Defense. My team and I, we conduct research and we voice the concerns for the atrocities and the human rights violations committed against minority and marginalized groups in Pakistan. Think of women and children, disabled children, religious minorities, such as the Hindus and the Christians, but also the LGBTQ plus community. They continuously face issues such as forced conversions, forced marriages, honor killings, and a discriminatory application of the blasphemy laws. We have extensively focused on issues such as child labor. Research has shown that since 1996, at least 3.3 million children in Pakistan are trapped in the child labor industry, simultaneously being deprived of their health, education, and childhood. Following that, we also focused on the lack of access to education for children in Pakistan. In 2020 alone, UNICEF estimated that 22.7 million children are unable to attend school. Our research has shown that girls especially are deprived of access to education because in fact 32% of girls are not attending schools for various reasons. We find that the lack of public funding is the main culprit because only 2.8% of Pakistan's GDP is allocated towards education. Global Human Rights Defense firmly believes that the international community and the Pakistani government must prioritize their young citizens' ability to attend school, because we have to remember that the children of today will be the leaders of tomorrow. So proper, affordable, and accessible education is key. Forced conversions and forced marriages have also been a big issue in Pakistan, especially in the Sindh province, for way too long. It's a problem facing mostly Hindu and Christian women and girls. They get abducted, they are subjugated to sustained emotional and physical abuse, involving threats of violence towards themselves and their loved ones. They are subsequently converted to Islam and married off. After that, they remain under severe pressure and a threat of violence to say that they converted to the Islam voluntarily. Unfortunately, the police will either refuse to record a first information report or they falsify the information, thereby completely turning a blind eye to the victims and the issue as a whole. Violence against women and children in Pakistan is an ever-growing problem that needs urgent attention. Estimates tell us that 32% of women have experienced some form of physical violence, whether on the street or in the workplace. Moreover, 40% of women suffer from domestic abuse, which then risks being normalized in the eyes of their daughters. This problem needs to be tackled as soon as possible, and Global Human Rights Defense applauds the already positive developments that have taken place, such as locator apps and safety apps like the Punjab Safe City Authority Women's Safety app. Lastly, I want to draw your attention to the violence committed against the LGBTQ plus Pakistani population, especially the transgender community. Despite growing attention and laws protecting trans people, people still face a stigma, poverty, and murder. Research shows that the nation's damaging colonial past, which left an anti-LGBTQ plus legacy throughout Asia, is to blame. While there are progressive laws in place in Pakistan that protect the rights of transgenders, such as recognizing their transgender identity on national cards, trans people are often disowned by their families. As a result, 51% of the transgender community work in the sex industry or they beg on the streets, both of which have been outlawed in Pakistan. I would also quickly like to touch upon other prominent issues currently taking place in Pakistan. First and foremost, the issue of enforced disappearances, a cruel practice that has caused undescribable pain to hundreds of families in Pakistan over the past 2 decades. The families of the abducted victims have been protesting for more than 4,608 days for the safe recovery of their loved ones. In 2011, the Pakistani government formed a commission of inquiry to document and investigate the cases of these so-called missing persons. Since the commission's start in 2011, it has received at least 8,155 cases. 2,274 still remain unresolved. However, independent, local, and international human rights organizations estimate the number to be much higher. In 2020, the International Commission of Jurists here in Switzerland have said that the Commission has wholly failed to address entrenched impunity, and it has not held any perpetrators of these crimes to account. For Balochistan specifically, more than 63 people have been abducted and at least 26 were missing during December of 2021. Blasphemy is also a topic that I expect needs little introduction. It has been an important and a very hot topic in the past few months. Still, I want to highlight the situation of the Sri Lankan factory employee. Other factory workers claim that Sri Lankan man was damaging posters bearing the name of Prophet Muhammad. Violence broke out and a crowd of people started beating the Sri Lankan man to death and then burning his body to ashes. This was in December of 2021, just a little over 3 months ago. Earlier, in August of 2021, an 8-year-old Hindu boy became the youngest person ever to be charged with blasphemy in Pakistan. He was accused of intentionally urinating on a carpet in the library of a madrasa. The incident and the boy's release on bail led to a Muslim crowd attacking and vanishing a Hindu temple. This move charges the young person with blasphemy is unprecedented, according to legal experts. Blasphemy laws are being disproportionately applied against religious minorities in Pakistan. Our research shows that a total of 776 Muslims, 505 Ahmadis, 229 Christians, and 30 Hindus have been accused under various clauses of blasphemy laws from 1987 until 2018. On the 28th of April 2021, the European Parliament adopted a joint motion for a resolution on the blasphemy laws in which it calls for a more comprehensive approach to address the abuses and the discriminatory use and application of the blasphemy laws in Pakistan. Global Human Rights Defense asks and urges the international community to include and to give the necessary attention to the ongoing issues in Pakistan in their foreign policy. And we will continue to use our voice to help the marginalized minorities in Pakistan, and we will give a voice to those unable to speak. Thank you.
I now ask Mr. Jamshed Amiri to share his views. Mr. Amiri is a human rights defender from Western Balochistan. He is also the Human Rights Council's representative for Western Balochistan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Use this one?
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Use the microphone. But if you use it, it's better.
Yeah, it's better. My name is Jamshed Amiri. I'm also the member of Balochistan United Front, Iran, and a member of the Baloch Human Rights Council. And my friend Kamarjan explained about how the Balochistan was divided between three parts, between Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan. So I don't really have to go back to that one again. And after 1927, when the British have contract with the Iranian regime, like Reza Shah, they decided to give that part. Since that time, they put the pressure on the Baluchi people from both sides, in Pakistan and Iran. At that time, there is no education in Balochistan. When the people, they went to university, it wasn't increased from 10 or 13 people. One of the policy of the Shah regime was that to keep Baloch uneducated, no company, no industrial estate, nothing. And the reason was that they said if these people become educated, they may go to their brother in the other side, or they may become independent by Soviet Union, or blah, blah, blah. This is the problem when they make it. But during this time, the Baloch always have a struggling and they're fighting for the right democratic right with the Iranian regime as they're fighting in the other side with the Afghanistan or with the Pakistan government for their rights. So Since they occupied Balochistan, so our independence is finished and we become under control of the Shah regime. After the Shah regime is gone, so the Ayatollah came on the power. Ayatollah, when he came on the power, his regime, there is another thing that was religious, because most of the Baloch people in the Western Balochistan and the East Balochistan, they are Sunni, liberal Sunni. They are not religious, but they are liberal, Democrat. So they decided, Ayatollah regime, to make most of them Shia. So discrimination will be started, and the Balochi language, which is a language, and even in the Persian dialect, and in the Ayatollah they make it to one dialect from the Persian language. And in Constitution in 196 and 1976, they mention in the Constitution Article 15, every minority in Iran, like Kurdish, Turkish, Baluchi, and the Azeri, they have allowed to read their mother language or their language, but in practice it doesn't come to the reality. And in practice, nobody can do it. And when we are not allowed to make a single newspaper in the Baluchi language, which is on that. On top of that, there is no company or no any industrialization, the most Baluchi, that one which was graduated from university, they are not allowed to get job because the systematic organization, which they call it Harasat in Iran, and they will ask him if they know he is a Baluch, and from the Baluchi tribe or Baluchi nation, they always respect him, not only Baluchi, even Kurdish and Turkish and Turkmen Sahara, they all have in Iran this problem. At the moment, in the West especially, they say when we can say Iran, they said maybe Iran only the Persian. But actually Iran is not Persia. Iran is Baluch, Iran Turkmen, Kurd, Turk, and they have their own language, their own culture, and everything. And most of the, another thing which is we are suffering at the moment, Baluchi people, they are not use their own cultural, even the name of their children. When they're born, they should go to put the government, give them a list with the Arabic name or Islamic name or Iranian name, but not Baluchi name, they are forbidden. If they found anybody to have the Baluchi name on their children, they will be arrested or they give him the ID to use in the supermarket or to use in the health service or in education. If, for example, they have a Baluchi name, if you go to a school for the enrollment, they said, no, this name will be not accepted. This is another aspect which we are doing. The other aspect at the moment, as I mentioned, there's no job. Most of the Baluch young generation, they are going to do the diesel or petrol. Because during the sanction, the old economical petrol and sanction will be done by the revolutionary government, which they threw it to Pakistan through the Baluchi Sea or Makran Sea, they took it to India or China, this and that. But most of the young people, they carry like 10, 12 gallons of diesel, and this one will be shot by the Revolutionary Guard and they will be killed. Recently in Sarawak, we have 35 people killed, and their children and the wife still they have nobody to look after them. One of the governor in the Zahedan province, they said, we are going to make that, but still no, they didn't do the action, still they are waiting for them, nothing is happening. There is many aspects happening in Balochistan. We are aware that Balochistan is very rich resources there. We have like 1,200 kilometers of coastal area. Our fishery industry destroyed. Now we have a contract with China for 25 years. Like $400 million have to be resources being made like hotel or resources in the coastal sea of Balochistan. But this one is not doing anything to the Baluchis people. They are immigrating many non-Baluch, non-Sunni people to that area. Our land, our coastal, all is going to be destroyed. And one of the government policy is that to eliminate the Baluchi people from our lands. It's when they're bringing people from Isfahan and Yaz, from Shiraz, other part of Iran, which they are Shia, and they make them resident in the Balochistan, because for the tomorrow, if there is war and democracy, let them live in the majority and we be in the minority in our house and land. This is one of the government policy which they're doing in Iran at the moment. And our industry destroyed. They bring the trial from the China. All our environment and our sea, being that from the fish until the any in the sea, they will be destroyed by China and will take that. And our local fishermen, as they are doing in the other part of Balochistan in Gawada, the same in the Iranian side, their boats is taking out of the sea, and they are suffering and they are crying for the job, but there is nothing. This is all discrimination happened in the Ayatollah regime and one of the brutal regime. I don't need have to mention that one because you are all aware of that. There is only one law which can do the Shia Islamic law, which is only kind of that. Ayatollah Khamenei during his time was Shah sent him to Balochistan, and Baloch people keep him as a guest. They look after him, and some of them, when they took him to his house to help him. But after that, when he come to the power, he ordered the Mersad. Mersad, one of the group of the revolutionary guard, they said, if you saw anybody in Balochistan, you have right to shoot him. Even they have one petrol diesel, or they have a whatsoever, even the bread and the other drink which they bring it from the other brother from Eastern Balochistan. If they do see that one, they will shoot at them. And they said, this killing policy, as they're doing in the Eastern Balochistan, in happening in Western Balochistan.
Mr. Jamshed, I have to request because of time restriction.
Okay. So we don't have any differences between East and West. We all suffering from that. This is at the moment we will see the international community instead to put the pressure on Ayatollah regime, and they see they're dealing with it, and we can see now they can certainly doing the job for their own interest. I hope now international community or United Nations or all organizations which they're writing for time is come for them to be awake and stand together against the Ayatollah regime. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now request Mr. Munawar Dagari. Munawar Dagari is a human rights activist from Sindh. He is the executive director of the Sindhi Foundation in the USA. Mr. Dagari, please.
Thank you, my friend. Actually, when I entered in this room, one young man came to me and he said, you have to speak Sindhi. I will be very happy to speak in Sindhi, and want to speak in Sindhi with a great, our poet, Shabd Bhitai. I think young man is there. नाम चाहेगा? हम सिंधी में कहाँ पंजो डाला है थोड़ा. So माँ पंजो सिंधी में, I want to speak in Sindhi and start with the poet, great our poet Shabd Bhitai. Is like a poet or like a prophet to us. पूछे तो बुरो फाजा बात नामी थे को रवा थेशी उन्होंने कई हुई पाण में का एजा भलेशी पुनु परवेशी कज प्यादी जो पंध में सिंधी ऐं बलोची जो कॉम्बिनेशन इन जो गजल में हिकिड़ो उन पंहिंजो इज़हार कयो आहे छाकाणि त बलोच ऐं सिंधियुनि जो जेको पाण में रिश्तो आहे थोड़ो ट्रांसलेट कंदो आहियां ॿियनि खे बि थोड़ो सम्झ में अचे. The Sindhi and Baloch have a very special relationship. A great poet in our Sindh, Shabd Bhitai, and the lady named Sasui. She walked in the mountains and went to his beloved Unnu. So Shabd Bhitai is talking about that one. In a very difficult mountains. So we can English में ही कराया.
इंग्लिश में बात करें दूसरे लोग नहीं समझते.
हाँ.
सिंधी
फरमाइश पूरी कैसी होती. So Sindhi and Baloch have a very strong and important relationship. One is that the Punnu and Sasui is a kind of the story in our history. And a great poet elaborated in 5 important chapters. So it's a love story. It's a beautiful story. If you Google it, you can learn more about Sasui, how the women in Sindh and Balochistan freedom in that time era. So in a very difficult situation in Pakistan, the most suffering in our society is the woman. When Sindh was independent, when Balochistan was free, our woman was free. No suffering. Love is the most important thing in our lives. Am I talking about the LGBT community? We have no problem about that kind of, but because of the Pakistan society, Pakistani and Islamic culture and society and that kind of the religion created so much problem among us. But I want to talk about more than that, the three important factors in Balochistan's current situation. One is China. China, Amir Saab said that Baloch is fighting against the Iranian, Baloch is fighting against the Afghanistan's situation and against the Pakistan. But the major factor is coming in Baloch life is the China. So we have to be ready to fight against the Chinese army. We have to prepare ourselves. That is the most challenging situation is coming. And the second factor, which Pakistan blackmailing the whole world and its Sindhis and Baloch and the oppressed nation by nuclear weapon. And India is also thinking that Pakistan has the nuclear weapon, so they can, nuclear is a prevent kind of the weapon. But if Russia, Soviet Union broken, so Pakistan is not a big deal, not a difficult situation. We can get our freedom if we are united and we have struggled. But the third most important factor, which we are facing it, is the mullahs, extremism. That is also another factor which we are going to face it. I want to give you a little bit another side of the aspects because you already elaborate about the problems and issues. And we are doing our protest diplomacy. We are doing our intervention diplomacy. We are doing our advocacy diplomacy. We are doing so many other kind of the diplomacy in Europe, in America, in Canada, and different other places. But recently I have started a different kind of the diplomacy, you can say, or a different kind of activism work, which I got inspiration from the Mama Qadir Baloch, who walked from Quetta to Islamabad. So we started walk from New York to Washington, 350 miles, last April 7 to April 29. And this year we are walking in Toronto to Ottawa, 424 kilometers. We are going to be reaching out to the different parliament members, Congress, like academicians, human rights activists, different peoples. And in 2023, my vision is this: we have to walk from Geneva to Brussels. I don't know how much kilometers that we are going to walk, and with your cooperation, with your support, that will be another factor we can do our advocacy, our diplomacy, and I'm very confident that way we can bring more awareness in the media, in the parliament, in the commission, and I'm sure Sindhis and Baloch case will be more highlighted in the Europe and other parts of the world. Thank you so much.
First, Mr. Hassan Hamdan. Mr. Hamdan is a human rights activist and a writer. He is the vice chairperson vice president of the BHRC, and he's the author of the recently published book entitled The Right to Self-Determination Under International Law and Politics, the Case of the British People.
Thank you, Commander. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered today to speak about human rights. The speakers we already mentioned spoke about human rights violations. I see today in the world the biggest issue we are facing as human beings is the violation of human rights. If the people will be respected, they have their dignity, they have their democratic rights, how beautiful this world can be. But the irony is this, that world is divided in different parts, and some of us living in the developed countries, we have privilege to enjoy these rights, and many parts of the world, the same people like us, they are deprived and they are facing the atrocities, the death, kidnap, and missing persons. The right of self-determination is a fundamental right of people. This is integral to basic human rights. A fundamental freedom is stated by the United Nations, and it is in various treaties. The concept of right to self-determination has been derived from the inalienable human rights sources, attempting to make sure that all people are treated with respect and dignity. The principle is a human right-based international legal order that provides conditions in which people exercise their political, economic, cultural, and social rights. The UN Charter, the International Covenant on Human Rights, the ruling of the International Court of Justice made the right of self-determination an integral part of the human rights law, a fundamental right that bears a universal application according to international laws. This right entered an important stage in its development in 1960, when the principle evolved into the right of self-determination by the UN General Assembly in Resolution 1514. Furthermore, the Helsinki Final Act of 1975, the United Nations and the International Court of Justice declared that the right of self-determination is a core principle of human rights. The subjugation, domination, and exploitation of people constitutes a denial of fundamental human rights, is contrary to the Charter of the United Nations, is an impediment to the promotion of world peace and cooperation. The aim of the recognition of this democratic principle was to empower people and nations in choosing their destiny under the umbrella of the United Nations. After the Second World War, ethnic conflict erupted in many parts of the world. As the decolonization of the world proceeded, the regional dispute for power began to rise. The larger and stronger group of people marginalized and deprived the smaller groups of the right, of a smaller group of their rights. Therefore, the people called for United Nations to protect their homeland, language, culture, identity from the invaders. The inequality of the structure of power in many countries causing inconceivable human suffering in political unrest. The conditions are exacerbating due to the refusal of implementing internationally recognized human rights values. The failure of states accommodated their grievances of people, intensifying the demand for the right of self-determination around the globe. The same thing happened in Iran and Pakistan, where the government adopted a brutal policy of oppression towards the smaller nations. The conflict between Pakistan and Baloch has intensified throughout 74 years of Pakistani denial to recognize the democratic right of the Baloch people. The first and the most important role of the state is to protect its citizens from being harmed. And second is to provide them with justice according to the laws of the state and the rules of international legal orders. Let alone protecting or providing justice in Iran and Pakistan, Iran and Pakistan are killing and dumping the body of Baloch people. Besides the harm
armed forces, they are using their proxy Islamic extremists and death squad against the Baloch nation. These groups are unleashed to carry out violent acts against the liberal politician, human rights activists, and the minority groups. The Pakistani army consider these death squads the secret security forces of Allah given state. They believe that Allah gave this Pakistan to them. Allah given state. They are assisting the military establishment in its dirty work of killing and dumping the bodies of political activists in remote areas of Balochistan. These jihadis organizations are patronized by the army, are believed to be the harboring international terrorists who have been terrorizing the people in many parts of the world. The Allah-given country of Pakistan has become a haven for terrorists and a hell for those who raise their voices for the national rights and against their oppression. The country has become the worst place on the planet for human rights campaigner and religious minority. When the phenomena of enforced disappearances began to unfold in Balochistan, people took the streets and protested against the arbitrary arrest of students and political activists. The voices of Baloch human rights organizations and political leaders and the protesters were met with yet more abduction and disappearances. To add in the result to injury, the people who took part in the protest for the release of missing persons were abducted and made missing person too. The situation deteriorated even further when the security forces began to target those who simply expressed their thoughts about the harsh policy of the state toward the Baloch people. The military crackdown on freedom of expression reached to alarming level when speaking about the military action in Balochistan became a military created taboo. The media was also banned from the reporting about missing persons on the multitude of dead bodies, which were constantly surfacing every part of Balochistan. Thousands of people have been missing for years, and their fate is still unknown. Those barbaric actions against the population are designed to silence the resilient voice of Balochistan. There is a strong evidence that the continued forced disappearances and kill and dump policy of Pakistan becoming a systematic genocide of the Baloch nation. These heinous crimes against humanity have been widely reported by the many national and international organizations, including Pakistan Human Rights Commission, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch. Pakistan and Iran are in breach of all human rights conventions under the international law. They are barring the Baloch from speaking and learning their language, destroying their basic of their distinct existence as a nation. The undesirable exploitation of part of exploitation and position in other group from one place to another is trying to outnumber the Baloch nation in their own homeland. Pakistan and Iran are the worst human rights violators in modern history and are equally responsible for sponsoring jihadists in various parts of the world. Thank you very much for your
Thank you very much. I'll now ask Mr. Junaid Qureshi to share his thoughts on the subject matter. Mr. Junaid Qureshi is a writer and a prominent human rights defender from Kashmir. He is the director of Amsterdam-based think tank, the European Foundation for South Asian Studies. Mr. Qureshi.
Thank you. Just to give you a small introduction. First of all, my apologies for being a bit late. And secondly, I blame it on my friend Nasir that I couldn't print a few notes I made, so I'll take a bit of help Um, uh, we are basically an organization based in Amsterdam who does research on South Asia, specifically focusing on the issues of terrorism, Pakistan relations, Jammu and Kashmir, and of course with that comes the situation of human rights in the region. I was very intrigued by the title of this conference. I've been to conferences where it says, the terrorism in South Asia or the situation of human rights in South Asia or any other country. This title is very intriguing. Baloch Lives Matter. It almost feels as an outcry with an implied meaning that they do not matter until now, that we have to call the attention of people that indeed Baloch life matter. And I think one of the reasons that we have come to this point, that certain lives are just not even considered lives. Baloch issue is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in a normal political discourse in Europe or in human rights issues, I think the Baloch discourse is very much missing. I think, for example, we Kashmiris have a bit of, because of the fact that it's an area being administered by 3 nuclear powers, there is a threat of a nuclear war. So we Kashmiris, still less, but we still get some kind of spaces in the margins of media in the Western world, but Baloch do not. And the same goes for example, the people in Sindh. Exactly the same issue. Until I met my friends of Sindh who educated me on the issue, I was not very much aware about this about these issues. And I think that there are two ways to go about it. And I think this conference and the organizers of this conference have already embarked upon this journey by doing two very good things. One is that they have gathered different shades of opinion and different shades of people from Kashmir, from Balochistan, from Sindh on this stage. And one other step to get to that point and get towards recognition, acknowledgement, and then to a solution is the lady sitting over there, Emma, that we should make use of her very good offices in order to not only highlight the issues we face, but may I also be so free to call upon her and her institution to help us in trying to reform how these issues are taken up at the UN Human Rights Council, at the building that we are sitting across from. Kofi Annan once said that a UN which does not stand up for human rights is a UN that will not stand up for itself. And one of the instruments which the UN has, the UN Human Rights Council has, for example, in calling states, in holding them accountable, is the mechanism of a UPR, which is a Universal Periodic Review. And I'll just give you, because my institution wrote a paper on this, and I just want to give you a few of those sentences which are written there about what happens with them. First of all, the UPR is not punitive in nature. Second of all, any kind of recommendations which come out of a UPR, a state can reject them, take note of them, or try to better them. And nothing happens after that. We are now on the 17th of March, just 2018, 16 months. So with the difference of one day, spot on 4 years ago, during the 37th session, there was a UPR outcome on Pakistan in the UNHRC. And Pakistan, out of 289 recommendations, only accepted 168 and noted 121. So almost half of them, they just noted. Noted means rejected. One of those, and I'll read out a few recommendations which they rejected, and that is to dismantle special terrorist zones, safe havens, and sanctuaries and take verifiable actions including on terror financing. This is a recommendation which the Pakistani state rejected at this council. The second is to provide freedom to the people of Pakistan occupied Kashmir by ending its illegal and forceful occupation. They rejected this. To end the harassment of minorities and place procedural and institutional safeguards to prevent the misuse of the blasphemy laws. Rejected. To stop targeting political dissidents and legitimate criticism in Sindh, Balochistan, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. To bar military courts from trying civilians and allow their monitoring by international observers. To ensure that madrasas within the territory of Pakistan operate in line with the human rights obligations of Pakistan. These are simple recommendations which every civilized country would actually feel ashamed of, that some institution is calling them to pay attention to. These were rejected by Pakistan. So I think we in our struggle, we have been very successful, because otherwise we wouldn't have people sitting in this room. We have been very successful in highlighting our issues. We have been very successful in bringing these issues to the power corridors in Europe. And now we need MRs. We need MRs. We need 10 MRs. We need 20 MRs who will help us in transforming this institution and other institutions, which will take action the way Nasir Saab just alluded to, the way we all have been taking actions against Russia, and it's hurting us. Look at our human rights standing. That is the history, and that is the, that should be the arrogance and the proud, or the pride the Europeans feel, that they are the safeguardians of human rights and they are willing to stand up for human rights, even if that means that their electricity bills are going to triple, or that the gas prices at the pump are going to double. Yet we stand up for human rights. And now, people like Emma and you people need to tell these institutions that there are some forgotten people far away who are equally human and who are equally worthy of human rights. And if you stand up for them as ferociously as you stand up for the Ukrainians today, first of all, it won't matter in your pockets, it won't matter to your economy, but what it will matter to is to your conscience. And that's where these institutions, their conscience needs to be shaken by people like us, to tell them now it's the time to move forward. We have been highlighting these issues for the last 75 years, whatever is happening in our region. And yet, a UPR, a recommendation of years of, we come here, we take off from work, we spend our money, we come here and tell these institutions what is happening, and on the basis of that information they make recommendations, and a state is as easily as it can just reject it. And that is where we need to now focus on, to make these institutions apply these restrictions, make the state accountable, and if they are not complying with their human rights obligations, whether it's Pakistan or any other country, that they use punitive leverages, whether that is in the form of sanctions, whether that is in the form of selling weapons. Let's not forget, I just quoted a few days ago, Switzerland is one of the major suppliers of arms to Pakistan. They won't be killing Baloch people if they don't get the arms. So, at some point of time, with your help, we need to move forward to get Pakistan to stand at these institutions and explain what they are doing to us, not only to the Baloch people, to Kashmiri people, to Sindhi people, to Pashtun people, and let's not forget, to their own Pakistani citizens. The Pakistani citizens are victims of the foreign policy of the Punjabi elite and the Pakistani military establishment. They are also getting killed. The recent attack on a Shia mosque did not kill generals or generals' children or majors. Common people, common Pakistani people were killed. So I hope that you people, institutions like yours, will help us in now taking the next step of getting these institutions to act. Thank
Our final request, Dr. Nakul Yohana, who is a well-known human rights defender from Sindh, and he is the General Secretary of World Civil Congress, a human rights advocacy organization. Dr. Nakul, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Baloch Human Rights Council. The panelists, they have shed light on various aspects of human rights violations in Balochistan, in particular, and in Pakistan in general. They have covered most of the aspects of the atrocities. The title of today's seminar is Baloch Lives Matter. It is really very, very cruel to say, but the truth is that in Pakistan, Baloch lives don't matter. Since the occupation of Balochistan in 1948, March 1948, it started with the genocide, occupation and genocide, and that genocide has never stopped. The documentary shown and some figures were presented, and the Baloch nation has never stopped resisting the occupation and never have stopped their struggle for their freedom and independence. The current freedom struggle that started in 2000, there are various figures, and it is really always very, very difficult and very sensitive to gauge the numbers of a date. But it is estimated that thousands of Baloch have been killed massacred, and thousands are missing. We don't know their fate, whether they are dead or alive. These mutilated bodies, these collected graves, bombardment, wholesale bombardment of the villages from the air of the Pakistan army, destroying cleaning the entire villages from Balochistan. Now just imagine as a human being, say one person is killed. How many lives are impacted? When we're talking about Baloch lives matter, if one person is killed, how many lives are impacted? They will have parents, they will have brothers and sisters, they might have children, uncles, aunties. In our societies, there is a system of families, extended families, then they will have friends, they will have communities. So even if one person is killed, literally hundreds of people are directly impacted, and scores of them will bear these scars for the rest of their lives. So what is Balochistan? Balochistan
is 44% of the area mass of Pakistan. And what that means, to understand, to make you to understand, that is more than 8 times bigger than the area of Switzerland. That is the area of Balochistan. And what is its population? The population is 7 million currently, Baloch population. So, in a country of 7 million, when thousands are murdered, and when you look at their bodies, and those, just imagine, those who are directly related, their parents, their children, and what will be their lives who have seen their loved ones, their butchered bodies? So, a country, a nation of 7 million, when thousands of, just imagine, literally life of every Baloch, except those who are the collaborators and death squads for the Pakistani military, they have been impacted even their lives. One of the lawmakers from Balochistan, Sadar Atala Megal, he said that I went to a camp where people, mostly women, they were basically protesting for a release of the missing ones, and they asked that, go to the assembly and ask whether we consider ourselves widow or not. Just imagine what will be their lives. The children asked, do we consider ourselves as orphans or not? What will be their lives? Balochistan, which has got, one of the highest natural resources. It has got gold, it has got uranium, it has got gas, it has got petrol, it has got coal, it has got coastal area. Believe me, I'm not exaggerating. The 70% of the Baloch population, they live still in medieval times. The woman barefoot, they have to walk for miles to get water. And even that water is not drinkable, according to the children, they walk miles to get to schools. Many die when they get ill and trying to find hospital. The hospitals are so far that by the time there aren't roads, and by the time when they reach there, they are dead. The infant mortality in Europe, I'm talking about the entire Europe, is about 3. So every 3 children that are born, they are not born live, they are born dead. Do you know what is the infant mortality in Balochistan? In Pakistan, the infant mortality rate is 55. And in Balochistan, the infant mortality is 129. And 129 means that is 40 times higher, 40 times. And 40 times means 4,000% higher than the mortality rate of it. And what will be the life of that mother whose child is born dead? Emma was talking about the girl education. In Balochistan, the girl education is hardly 15-20%. So the entire, this genocide is not only, because according to the UN definition of genocide, genocide is the large-scale killing of a group of people, a national group, an ethnic group, a religious group. It's not only elimination and genocide that is taking place in Balochistan. The second clause says when the conditions of life are created which cause large-scale death, they have created, more than 70% people, they live medieval times in huts still of this rich country. What will be their lives? Baloch lives don't matter at all. And to be honest, never in human history the lives of slaves have been a matter for the colonial powers. Where UN was established, it was immediately after the Second World War. And the human life, they saw the misery. The first charter, first law, covenant, bill that was adopted by the United Nations, that was Charter of Human Rights. And do you know what the preamble says? That world has seen the misery that we didn't see in the past. If there are no human rights, there will be no justice. And if there is no justice, there will not be peace. But with the passage of almost 77 years of the end of Second World War, that motto has really faded. It is taken over by political strategic interest. But to be honest, it is still true. If there are no human rights, there will not be justice. And if there is no justice, there will not be peace. Although Baloch people are paying the price, but still, world will not see the peace until the Baloch lives become matter. So it is really very, very, very important for world to understand this. And who could do that? Because the priorities in the decision making, in the policy making, in the institutions, as Junaid Saab was saying, they have changed. They really have forgotten these principles. They have completely lack of vision. World could be much better place, and we have to make it. And it couldn't be a better place if the human rights, human dignities, right to self-determination, every human being has got a right of human rights. If there are no human rights, they are not treated as humans. Therefore, let me work for it. Let me work until the lives of Baloch people become matter, and they live the life of human beings rather than miseries and suffering. We Sindhis as a nation, we are going through same genocide. We consider Baloch as a Munawar said, we got a very, very special relation. Our destinies are intertwined, and we request you all, let me change this mindset of the international policy making that we are human beings and our lives do matter. And thank you very much once again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will have a very short question and answer session. If anyone of you has a question to ask, please introduce yourself and also who you want to ask the question, please. Anyone?
No. Okay, yes, please. Yeah. You need to. That was fun, yeah.
Hi, I'm Domenico and I'm from the UN team of GHRD. And I would like to thank you all for this incredible informative session that we had today. And acknowledging what has been said in this session, I think that information is the power to actually try to get the Balochistan people the rights they deserve. And I want to understand what you not expect from the civilized world, as you call, because I don't see a civilized world, but what do you request of us? What are your requests and what are your voices screaming for us to actually do as human rights defenders? Thank you.
Can you please also ask who do you want to answer your question?
In general, to the one who actually wants to answer.
What is our request?
Yes.
Our simple request to make. We were all born free. Maybe unluckily, I wasn't born in Kiev. And it's horrible what's happening in Ukraine. And it's heartwarming, the response we have seen. We might not be that blonde, that blue-eyed, but we are also human beings. And that is our request. Consider us as equal human beings which are born with inalienable free rights.
And we request you to work for it, to help us, to put this narrative across, particularly because waste has got a very, very important role to play. Therefore, once this narrative reaches to the policy making, that would bring some change.
Yes, I want to request you that Pakistan Foreign Minister, if you look, if you Google, in a month almost one time or two times has a meeting or phone call or they are doing it. And they're giving the one face of the Pakistan doing this, Pakistan doing this. It's a very strong relationship. When you are listening to these speakers, you are a young person, you yourself analyze that what is going on in that region, right? So you better yourself be creative and tell these bosses and those people that there's other Pakistan too, although we don't call ourselves Pakistan, honestly speaking. And let them know that what is going on in that region. That's my humble request. Thank you.
And probably we need to look for friends, and you need to help us to look for friends inside of Pakistan. Because I believe that, Baloch people will only get justice when non-Baloch people will start asking for their justice. Kashmiris will only get justice when people living in Delhi, Mumbai, Islamabad or Karachi will start asking for justice for Kashmiris. So we also need, apart from having the rightful freedom to criticize these policies, which are policies of policy makers, we must not forget there are many people inside of these countries who are equal victims of these policies, and we need to build bridges with them and take them along.
I would like to add one thing, that in Western world, there are democratic systems, public opinion matters a lot. Even if you don't want to help us, Baloch, Sunnis, but at least what you could ask your governments, don't help those who are committing crimes against humanity. Say, for example, European Union has given Pakistan GSP plus status. And one of the requirements of the GSP plus status is that a country should comply with 20, there's a list of human rights, they should comply. And Pakistan literally go to the UN, complies with none. How can you give this GSP plus status? How your governments, at least if you don't help us, don't help those, the perpetrators who are committing crimes against humanity, go through the media, develop that pressure so that your policymakers at least stop. And then that will make some change. Sorry?
It's not a signatory to the
Yeah, no.
statute.
But at least they should stop that and the aid, basically. They can do that. They can stop, they can withdraw, revoke the GSP plus status. They can do that.
I hope the question is answered, and once again, I'm very thankful to our distinguished speakers for their time and for sharing their insightful views with us, and also to you all for your time and for attending this seminar. Thank you very much for your time.